IB Bio, Molecular Biology Part 1, will provide some introductory information necessary for a closer examination of organic molecules. Molecular biology explains living processes in terms of the chemical substances involved. For millennia, people believed in vitalism, a belief that living organisms are fundamentally different from non-living entities because they contain some non-physical element, a life spark, a vital force that's absent in non-living things. Vitalism held that living things are governed by different principles than non-living things. Vitalism held that organic molecules could only be made by living things that contain the vital force. Biologists now accept that living organisms are governed by the same chemical and physical forces that are found in non-living things. The theory of vitalism was falsified in the 1800s when an organic molecule, urea, was synthesized in the laboratory. The first artificial synthesis of an organic compound falsified vitalism. The essential idea is that living organisms controlled their composition by a complex web of chemical reactions. Here's an outline of the 6 parts of molecular bio. This movie, focused here, provides some background important to understanding the biomolecules, proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, and nucleic acids. Here's the IB syllabus statement. Distinguish between organic and inorganic compounds. List the 4 organic compounds composed of carbon. We'll do that on the next slide. It's important to note that organic compounds contain carbon, but more importantly, organic compounds are typically found in living organisms or a once living organism. The amino acid seen here on the left is organic, but carbon dioxide here on the right is not organic. Plants take up carbon dioxide to build sugars, and all organisms release carbon dioxide as a respiratory waste product. But organisms are not composed of carbon dioxide. One last thing, you should recognize that each carbon in these molecules has made 4 bonds. This should be familiar to you from Small Molecules Part 1. Review small molecules as necessary. Organic compounds include carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. And if you look carefully at every carbon atom, notice 4 bonds. Carbon atoms can form 4 covalent bonds, allowing a diversity of stable compounds to exist. Urea, seen here, is an organic compound formed when amino acids, seen here, are broken down or metabolized. The NH2 group of amino acids are removed in a process known as deamination. The NH2 groups are then added to carbon dioxide to form urea, which is a nitrogen compound of low toxicity, and it's an organic compound. Now, urea is a waste compound secreted to the blood by the liver, and then it's removed from the blood by the kidneys. When urea was artificially synthesized in the laboratory in the 1800s, the theory of vitalism was falsified because the theory of vitalism held that only living organisms could make organic compounds. The fact that carbon forms 4 covalent bonds, allowing for a diversity of stable compounds to exist, means that polymers can be formed. Polymers are large molecules composed of repeating units. The molecules of life, proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, and nucleic acids, are polymers, with carbon forming the backbone of the molecule. Molecular biology explains living processes in terms of the chemical substances involved. The atomic structure of carbon is critical to the functioning in larger organic molecules. With 4 electrons in the second electron orbital, carbon requires 4 covalent bonds for stability, just like we can see here in methane. 1 bond for carbon, a second, a third, and a fourth. By forming 4 bonds, carbon lies centrally in the formation of polymers of the 4 biomolecule groups: carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. In this image, you can see how central carbon is to these 2 molecules, an amino acid on the left and glucose on the right. Carbon and nitrogen form the backbone of the amino acid and ultimately form the backbone of proteins, which are polymers of repeating amino acid units. Carbon forms the backbone of this glucose and ultimately forms the backbone of larger carbohydrates, which have glucose as the repeating unit in the polymer. Here's the IB syllabus statement. Molecular biology explains living processes in terms of the chemical substances involved. The activities of living things can be explained in terms of the chemical substances involved. Life is based on carbon compounds, including proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, and nucleic acids. These 4 organic molecules are important polymers composed of atoms, like carbon, each with unique bonding patterns and characteristics. So that leads us to an important IB syllabus statement. Define the terms metabolism, anabolism, and catabolism. Metabolism is the web of all enzyme-catalyzed reactions in a cell or organism. Anabolism is the synthesis of complex molecules from simpler molecules, including the formation of macromolecules from monomers by condensation reactions. Catabolism is the breakdown of complex molecules into simpler molecules, including the hydrolysis of macromolecules into monomers. Notice the terms condensation and hydrolysis in these definitions. Stay tuned. Condensation synthesis is an anabolic process by which small molecules, known as monomers, are joined together to form larger molecules known as polymers. This is a covalent bond formed when the monomers are joined here and water is removed when the bond is formed. In condensation reactions, water is removed. So here it is. Outline the role of condensation and hydrolysis in the relationship between monomers and polymers. Condensation synthesis, an anabolic process, can be seen here as monomers, represented as squares, are joined together to form a polymer, and again a monomer joining to form a polymer. Water is removed when the covalent bond is formed here and here in the formation of the polymer. Condensation reactions would be catalyzed by an enzyme. Hydrolysis is catabolic. Polymers, as seen here, are macromolecules, and they're broken down under the influence of an enzyme into monomers. Water is required to break the bonds that ultimately form the monomers as the larger molecule is broken down in a catabolic process. So, as a prelude to Biochemistry Part 2, let me rephrase the IB syllabus statement. Outline the role of condensation and hydrolysis in the relationships between amino acids and polypeptides. Biochemistry Part 2 will look at the biomolecule known as protein. And that brings us to the end of IB Bio, Molecular Biology Part 1. It's an introduction on to the macromolecules, starting with protein.